My recent overseas trip to China and Singapore, China in particular. Now, normally I would report these into economic development. The reason why I'm bringing you to this today was because this was not so much a business or trade delegation, although there were some pretty clear outcomes that came from it that way. This was, you recall, last year when President Xi from China came to see us. He and our Prime Minister agreed that we would have an annual local government forum. And the annual local government forum consists of mayors from each of the two countries. She requested that this happen on the basis that, having agreed that China and New Zealand's trade would extend from 20 to 30 billion in 5 years, that local government and the relationship between councils in New Zealand and China were a critical part of building those strong economic relationships. So it was with real pleasure and a sense of a little bit of history, because I expect these will carry on significantly into the years ahead. 12 mayors from New Zealand and 12 mayors from China met. Now, just to give you a sense of what an interesting array it was, on the New Zealand side we had myself representing 1.5 million, and then Matamata Piako representing about 15,000. And on the Chinese side, they started with Guangzhou at about 15 to 20 million population, Shenzhen with about 15 million, we had Qingdao with 10 million, Ningbo, all of these our sister cities, with about 8 million. The smallest city represented by China was about 3 million. So it was though for 1.5 days, a very, very successful collaboration. There were a number of clear commitments made across the cities and towns for engagement, and as you'll know, China is a command economy. And the mayors there were very clear. They are looking for opportunities for investment by New Zealand and our cities into China, and the other way around in particular. And I've got one instance myself of a direct investment coming out of this, and as you'll see, I think Christchurch are looking to a significant Chinese investment to back up their infrastructure spend at the moment. I had during the course of this summit, had two meets with our sister cities from Qingdao and Ningbo. Qingdao is presenting a unique opportunity. Shortly after meeting the mayor of Qingdao, I met up with the party secretary of the Shandong province, which Qingdao is a part of. Both these two leaders have indicated they want a direct air service between Qingdao as a city of 10 million, Shandong as a province of 100 million, sitting slightly north of Beijing. They want direct flights. Qingdao, New Zealand. Now, we've presently got about 300,000 Chinese visitors a year into our economy, and with that type of continued growth in tourism and air transport from around China, things are looking good. So that was one particular benefit that came out of that, and Ningbo have got a trading relationship with our port. Ningbo port is about the 4th largest port in the world. It's massive. And they were making suggestions there as to how we might extend, particularly against the backdrop. They actually knew our study was taking place, against the backdrop of work we're doing around reviewing and oversighting the work of our port. So the forum itself, I think, will have considerable upside. We're hosting it in 2017 in Wellington, and I think local government New Zealand has to be there with bells on. I really think we need to host that, as we're going to host Guangzhou and Los Angeles in May next year in the second tripartite forum. That New Zealand hosting of Chinese mayors, we really need to be there as a local government sector with a lot of options available for investment. 2 years is a long time to get that ready, so I've delivered my colleagues a fairly clear message. They need to absolutely be ready when those guys hit town in 2017. Just a couple of things. I briefly visited my mayoral colleague in Guangzhou out of respect, and as a consequence of that, the Guangzhou high-tech hub, inner hub, has formed a partnership with Grid AKL, and they threw a $20 million investment pot into the mix as a part of the MOU. and that $20 million investment will be used for New Zealand companies, or for Auckland companies and Guangzhou companies, for high-tech startups. Brett O'Reilly, who was with me, indicated that he's had about 7 or 8 inquiries for this already from New Zealand startup companies, so that was a great immediate outcome. We also joined up WeChat, which has got 500 million users in China, and have opened up an Auckland page on WeChat, that plus a number of other outcomes I'll report into economic development. Just want to say too, briefly stopped in at Singapore, so 6-day visit, 3 cities. In Singapore I spoke to the Singaporean Livability Centre, and as a part of that and discussions around it, we will get 3 delegations of Singaporean investors over the next month or 2, most of whom I expect will invest in the city. To give you a reason why they really are interested in us at the moment, in Singapore, if you're investing in the banking system and you're looking for a return, you will get 0. The present return on investments with banks is a 0 return. They love their investment in Auckland and New Zealand, and the people that we spoke to, including ministers of the re-elected Singaporean government, are very, very interested in looking at Auckland and continuing the investment. So, councillors, to give you a sense of the fact that local government New Zealand and my colleagues and our sister towns and cities around New Zealand are stepping up into this space to assist in the national effort in terms of trading relationships with China is significant, and the work that we're doing thus far, and I want to acknowledge Brett O'Reilly in particular for his enthusiasm and effectiveness in this space, is proving to be very beneficial. I'll just note that for reporting, and we can have a more detailed discussion of the contents of that in the economic development. I move that. Second it, please. Councillor Chris. All those in favour say aye. It's against passed. Move on to item 14, allocation of discretionary capital budget to local boards. There's a recommendation. We've got Andrew. Andrew, I suspect we've arrived at a reasonable space. I think there's one small change, isn't there? Wasn't there? Oh, that's dogs. That's right. Yeah, so Andrew, anything you want to add? Dogs. Let the dogs out.
No, it's just we have to consult on the $10 million how we allocate the $10 million the council's provided for local boards to spend on CapEx. This is just asking for your approval for us to go out and undertake that consultation and seek a final decision from you in October.
Well, it looks like a pretty good sort of start. Any comments? Right, move it, second it. Oh, Councillor John. Thanks.
Just Andrew, just one of the questions that's come up via some of the local boards with respect of the equity of what's being proposed, particularly as it goes to this land area component of 5%. The point's been made whereby on the operational component of that, where there's a fair amount of travel, and that operational field is reasonable, but when it comes to the capital projects, the point's been made that much less travel costs, as they are located only in a few places and not throughout the local area as a whole, therefore the land allowance of 5% shouldn't apply. So I'd just be interested to hear what your reaction is to that in terms of equity and in terms of how it potentially benefits some local boards and penalises others.
Having a 5% allocation for land area does shift some of the money further towards the Rodney and a bit more to the Franklin local boards. However, none of the options that we've got here cause a big shift for the majority of the boards. They're all plus or minus 5%, except for Franklin, Waiheke, except for Rodney, Waiheke, and Great Barrier. So for the other 17 or 18 local boards, whichever option you choose only has a marginal effect on how much they receive. Officers' advice on the operating fund was that there wasn't a strong connection between land area and demand for services. However, when you're looking at the capital fund, there is some good logic, and we'd note that again, but we'd also say there's a good logic in using the same formula or a very similar formula for the capital fund as we do for the operating. Also, the decision you're making at this stage isn't to say this will absolutely be the answer, but rather it's a proposal for consultation, and you'll have a further opportunity to consider any public feedback along with further engagement with the local boards that's being arranged through the Finance and Performance Committee when you're making that decision in October.
It's just the point often made is that when we go out to consultation with something, that's what usually determines the response more often than not. But I just thought it was important to put that on the table, Mr. Mayor, because that is a concern that is a...
Yeah, I've heard it mentioned too, John. And that's right. I mean, one of the things we do know is that we really, very rarely get this perfectly right. And look, this goes to consultation primarily to the boards. And ultimately we'll be looking for, if not a unanimous position, then in something as close to as we can get. So I think this is a good starter for 10. And, you know, I mean, we were able to nut the OPEX side, and I'm sure we can nut this side.
It's certainly one of the factors that's noted in our advice. It's one of the balancing things that's included in the council.
Yeah. Now I've got Councillor Alf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Andrew, and my question flows on from what John's just been talking about in regards to the 5% land. You rightly pointed out, Andrew, that under 4 around the land component, and however staff note that allocation based on land area doesn't have a strong connection to demand for services and shifts significant funding to rural areas, and you've mentioned the two, Franklin and Rodney. So I'm interested in finding out why then we do have part 3 under A under the recommendations. If we're going out for consultation, why does that, so the land component, because it's more on the other local boards that would be missing out, for want of a better term, and that we don't put the 90 or 10 or 95 and 5% deprivation out for consultation. It's really why the recommendation from staff.
So the reason for that is because when we went and spoke to the local boards, this was 10 of the 21 boards supported that option. Secondly, it's also consistent with the formula for allocating operating expenditure, so there's a good case for it on both of those grounds. And all the other options are included in the consultation material, so the public and those who are interested. And we only had 14 submissions on the operating when we went and consulted on the operating expenditure. So all the information is there for people to consult on. That counter the argument about the impact of land areas in there, but the main reasons we're proposing this, 10 local boards in favour, and it's consistent with what we did with the operating expenditure.
Because my calculation is that 11 have said didn't want the land component to be in there. That's my understanding. And so I'm looking at 10, but 11 are saying, look, no. So that's why, if you're talking about numbers game, Andrew, that's why I'm mentioning it. 11 are saying no, 10 are saying yes, but let's do it. And I know, again, Your Worship, it's going out for consultation. Understand that. But I'm just sort of going through to what John had said earlier around what gets put out to our community is what people actually say, oh, this is what it may have, this is the way we're going to go. Thank you, that's all.
Yep. Oh, yep. All right, I've got Councillor Wayne. Right, Councillor Casey. Councillor Cathy.
Andrew, you just said that all the options were going to be in the consultation material. Does that include the 10% deprivation option?
So
90-10?
No, all the options that are presented in the report, so A, B, C, D and E, are included in the consultation material. We don't have a 90-10 option in the consultation material.